Welcome to this meeting today on the conference of Black Sea Security, looking at the Maritime Domain and its implications of this Black Sea security on Eastern and Central Europe. We're going to have a few speakers here today. I think György will introduce and then we'll begin presentations.
Yes, good day, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear colleagues. I am happy to greet everyone. It is a great pleasure for us to be able to analyze the Black Sea region relevance and how a region affects our security in Eastern and Central Europe at today's event with the help of excellent experts. Today's conversation timely given the changed geopolitical environment and the war in the neighborhood in Ukraine. It's time to introduce our panelists today. Tinatin Khidasheli serves as chairperson for Georgian think tank Civic IDEA. She was Minister of Defense for Georgia and previously served as a member of the Georgian parliament. Barış Hasan is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Department of Political Science and International Studies at the University of Pécs. He is also the coordinator for the ATA platform and non-governmental and independent discussion platform in Turkey. Paul Beckley is a maritime analyst who's been working for Nato for almost a decade. He focuses on hard security issues in the maritime domain. Michael van Ginkel is currently a senior fellow at the Hungary Foundation, working at IFAT, and an honorary fellow at the University of Wisconsin Center for Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. His main focus is on maritime security. He's the organizer and the engine of today's event. Our discussant today is our colleague János Barabás. János, senior analyst at IFAT. His main research fields are Romania, Moldova, neighboring policies, and also security policy. And now about the structure of today's conversation in a few words. First of all, each of our experts will share his or her main thesis on our topic in around 6 minutes. After that, our discussant will give us his comments about his introductory thoughts and our topic in general. Also, in the context of the speeches, all panelists will have the opportunity to react to each other. I, as moderator, will then raise some subtopics to help us all better understand today's situation in the Black Sea region. And finally, we will open a Q&A session to engage our guests and partners in this dialogue. All participants are kindly requested to enter their questions during the discussion using the Q&A Zoom feature. As usual, we spend a little over an hour on today's event. And before I give the floor to our guests, I would like to make a brief point. The Black Sea constitutes a crossroad for Europe, Asia, and Middle East. Situated between Russia, Southern Europe, and the Middle East, with access to Mediterranean and Central Europe, it represents much more than a zone of local importance. Recently, Russia has successfully altered the military status quo in the Black Sea to its advantage. Turkish support would be critical to any response because of Turkish naval capabilities and responsibility for the straits under the Montreux Convention. So everyone needs to understand Turkey's regional interests and plan for the future of the region with these interests in mind. The war in Ukraine has altered the security landscape of Black Sea region, but so far ties between Russia and Turkey have withstood the shock. We must acknowledge Turkey's positive role in stabilizing the region, supporting the Russian-Ukrainian peace talks, and helping to resolve the looming global food crisis. And now I suggest that we listen closely to our invited experts. And maybe let's start with Tinatin Khidasheli. Maybe she has some Tinatin Khidasheli with us. So I suggest you start the discussion. Or maybe, Michael, you want to start?
Yeah.
Tinatin Khidasheli here. Okay, welcome.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, absolutely. You can start, yeah.
It's okay now.
Then
Okay.
I suggest we start with your comments.
Okay, well, thank you very much, first of all, for this opportunity to contribute to the paper and also to be part of this discussion. As it was already mentioned, probably when the idea of this project started, there was no understanding at that moment how important Black Sea security actually be amid that Russian invasion to Ukraine and all the troubles that the region is going through at this very moment. In the light of these developments, both for NATO and European Union, Black Sea became one of those strategic geographies, if we can put it this way, for planning the future activities, for planning its own security, new security narrative, and also in the face of the changing world and changing dynamics in the European security arena. We see more and more increased role of the Black Sea. In 2016, it all started actually in 2016 Warsaw Summit, when NATO Warsaw Summit decided that Black Sea was an important integral part of the NATO security concept, and we've got this huge communique from the summit talking about the practical aspects for the protection, defense, and strengthening of the Black Sea countries. Georgia was fortunate enough to be, regardless of not being a member of NATO, to be included in this security dynamics thanks to our partners from NATO member Black Sea countries, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, as well as other NATO member countries. That's exactly the time, 2016, when the institutional framework in a country for the maritime, more effective maritime operations and management entered into force or became fully operational. And also talking about the Georgian portion of the Black Sea security, we should mention another important Georgia-NATO cooperation agenda, which is that we call it SNGP, the Substantial NATO-Georgia Package, via the Black Sea security, its operational aspects, the Coast Guard, strengthening of the Coast Guard Department and Coastal Guard itself, enhancement of the maritime domain operations and awareness capacities at the Black Sea, and so on and so forth. Lots of other instruments and arms for defense protection, strengthening have been considered in SNGP, the Substantial NATO-Georgia Package, and then implemented after it entered into force. And again, as I said, in 2016, after the Black Sea security concept was adopted by NATO, it got even more force and it got even more meaning for our countries. I don't really know to what extent you want me to talk in this first intervention. I believe there will be more questions and comments that we can continue this discussion, but as a sort of framework defining agenda for the Black Sea portion that comes to my country, I would name those two, the SNGP, Georgia NATO Substantial Package, and the 2016 Warsaw summit, NATO Warsaw Summit communique, where the major framework and all major dimensions of the Black Sea security were identified and also defined, and we've got the countries who became responsible for the implementation of various aspects of those documents, being in Turkey, being in Bulgaria, United States, and so on and so forth. As for the national domain, we obviously have a national legislation that covers those issues. We have special laws about the maritime security, special institutions dealing with the management, with the coherence of all the instruments, being it from the civilian side or military side, and also special units in charge of the awareness building. I think for the sort of the framework and the major institutional setup of it, that will be all. We'll be happy to respond to any issues that are interesting for this panel or the listeners.
Okay, thank you very much. Michael, maybe you go next. Please give us your introductory thoughts.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the introduction, and thank everyone for attending. The maritime domain is a critical component of the regional security architecture. And the maritime domain, to begin with, is a far larger concept than is often appreciated. It includes all things related to or adjacent to a sea, ocean, or navigable waterway, including all maritime-related infrastructure activities, cargoes, and vessels. This means that there's a huge economic aspect to the security. Within the EU, 75% of all EU trade is seaborne. This means that the maritime economy generates almost 500 billion euros a year. Of course, this comes with security concerns as well. Porous borders, enhanced connectivity, overlaps in jurisdiction between law enforcement agencies, coast guards, military, and border security create issues with information sharing and interoperability. These threats are perpetrated by both state and non-state actors. In the Black Sea, non-state actors, we have arms trafficking. These protracted conflicts act as catalysts to issues around illicit trade. As far as arms trafficking, we have both within the region movement of arms through porous borders and back through the Middle East, where there's a high demand for high caliber weapons. And there's also production centers that can be exploited by non-state actors that are looking to profit off of protracted conflicts. Drug trafficking, 81% of all global annual opium production occurs in Afghanistan. And as we have an estimated 3.1 million opioid users in Europe, the transit of drugs through the region is inevitable. Of course, there can be a lot done to mitigate the amount of seizures, amount of traffic narcotics in the region. And then we have nuclear trafficking. There's been a few instances, especially in relation to enriched uranium that has been found in the Black Sea region, and these need to be addressed for international concern. And we have threats perpetrated by state actors as well. Of course, these protracted conflicts have geopolitical dimensions to them, and their fluid power structures, high poverty, and low cost of welfare can create an environment that's conducive to more non-traditional maritime threats. State actors can also exploit the maritime domain with gray zone tactics. We have informal blockades, for instance, through the Sea of Azov by Russia is the most prominent example. This has massive implications for the economy of Ukraine. Even after the informal blockade was ended, wait times to the Kerch Straits have varied from a few hours now to up to 90. And this again can have a huge commercial impact. Spoofing of NATO warships and the commercial vessels have a commercial impact and can raise the risk of escalation in the region. And finally, we have military operations. Increased militarization, again, increases the risk of escalation and creates an unsafe environment for commercial vessels. More recently, of course, June 3rd marks the 100th day of the war. Almost 20% of Ukraine is occupied, and arguably the most long-term impact of this war could be in the maritime domain, where coastal occupation by Russia could change the status quo with the import and export of hydrocarbons and grains, and could place more pressure on sea lanes of communication that attach markets in the west to the east via transport corridors along the Danube Delta and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul Beckley, please give us your introduction report.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor, and good afternoon to everybody. I really appreciate the comments Michael just made, because it's going to lead very nicely into what I'm talking about. He just gave us a nice global picture about the importance of the maritime environment and the instability that's obviously spreading throughout the world. And then from that, I think that's what's driving. I don't know if military operations are increasing the risk of conflict, but rather it's all of these other elements of instability that are leading to increased military operations. So what I do at NATO is I'm a defense analyst. I'm responsible for taking NATO's level of ambition, translating those properly, and making sure that the allies are producing the requirements. In other words, do they have enough ships, submarines, airplanes, etc. And so what I'm very focused on at this time specifically is what is the future of naval warfare, and what does the future of naval warfare look like? The reason I'm asking that is I want to know what the right mix of forces are, so that we can deter and defend. And in this particular region, the Black Sea region, deterrence means something possibly a little different than it might mean for the coast of the Atlantic or other places in the Mediterranean. And I'll get into the specifics of geography in just a minute. So I just want to touch briefly on four things that I'm looking at right now in terms of context to determine whether or not we have the right forces. The first is technology. And everybody knows the buzzwords of AI, big data, quantum, unmanned. What do all of those technologies mean? I believe that we're on the cusp of a revolution of military affairs, just like mechanized warfare changed warfare, just like naval aviation changed warfare, the rifle, etc. These technologies are going to mean warfare is different in the future. Where, though, and exactly how is the question. And where do we put our resources to make sure that we're able to first deter and then defend if required? And that's something that we're working through very closely. For me in particular, my focal point is in experimentation to make sure that we're using those new technologies, experimenting with those new technologies, and in particular trying to encourage research and development, both on the industrial side, in the civilian side, as well as the military side, to make sure that we've got the right concepts of operations out there. Second big issue I'm looking at is the explosion of shipbuilding across the globe. And so the question I'm asking is, are we, and we meaning NATO, are we investing at the right pace? Are we keeping pace with the rest of the world? Do we have the national industrial capacity to be able, if, God forbid, there is a global conflict, to be able to generate the kind of forces that we need? Particularly with the Indo-Pacific. China right now has the world's largest military navy. Second, Europe only has one navy in the top 5 navies of the world, which is a massive shift from where we were back in the 20th century. And they only have 3 navies in the top 10 largest. So those are concerns that I have overall. Third is geography, and particularly the Black Sea. Black Sea is historically strategically important. You all know better than I will, so I won't go into why, but it is inhospitable to large surface combatants and conventional forces. And you just look at what happened in 1941 through 1944, and it's easy to see historically how difficult it is to operate there. The choke point axis, etc., makes it an exceptional or a place that is particularly well suited for the kind of bullying that we've seen for one nation to bully the other allies, Montreux Convention, etc. You don't have large NATO presence. You don't have large US forces out there to keep the peace, as it were. And so that the geography itself makes it particularly inviting for the kind of thing that we're seeing. And then the fourth aspect that I'm very concerned about is the cooperation and geopolitics of the region. Cooperation both at a tactical and operational level. Do we have the Black Sea allies providing the kind of information sharing that we would need, both subsurface, surface, and in the air, in order to increase the maritime situational awareness At this point, I will tell you quite frankly, I don't think that we do. And then the second is the geopolitical, and it's being addressed by other speakers as well. This is an area of concern to make sure that we've got the kind of cooperation that we need to keep the stability. And so the last point I'll make is that given that context, are we building the right forces? Do we have the right mix of forces? I think that we're moving in the right direction, but I'm concerned particularly that we've invested very heavily in what we call high-end combat, and that has meant very expensive multi-purpose surface ships to be able to conduct operations. And what that's meant is that you've had a large number of resources that's gone into a smaller number of vessels. So if you look at the US Navy, for example, you're looking at roughly 285 surface combatants. It's the same amount of tonnage that they had in 1985 when they had 400 vessels. So these large vessels, both in terms of carriers as well as the destroyers that they have, et cetera, are vulnerable when they put them in places like the Baltic and the Black Sea. They're going to, because of you've got increasing technology, you've got faster and more lethal missiles, and the missile envelope is expanded. So the result then is you're starting to look, and I think we're starting to move towards distributed operations. I think we're moving in the right direction, but we need to take a look at what types of vessels the Black Sea fleets need in order to be able to deter and defend in that region. Are they looking at more fast attack craft? Are they looking at missile boats, the kinds of things that they've had that have been successful in the past? Or are we asking them, NATO, to have globally deployable large surface combatants? I think the answer is we're asking for the latter, and we need to start moving towards the former. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much. Barış Hasan, please give us your introductory thoughts.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so just for a moment, I lost my contact, but I guess I'm okay now. So thanks for the previous speakers, and thanks for inviting me to the prestigious event. Let's say it is a very good opportunity for me to be in such an event with the prominent experts. So I'm trying to picture a framework about general security issues in Black Sea. I will just try to give an introductory remark about Turkish position, and I will try to mention the cooperation opportunities on the Black Sea. So, I mean, with the war in Ukraine, actually, we understood the strategic and geopolitical importance of the Black Sea. I mean, when you consider the military security, the security of economic activity, and security of the environmental elements in the Black Sea, the conflict in Ukraine put these issues on the agenda more and more, let's say, openly at the international agenda. And the other thing is that the Ukraine conflict is, according to my view, it is also a maritime conflict. We have seen it. So the conflict, the war started on the land, but after we have experienced the Russian strategy towards the Ukrainian coast and towards cutting the Ukraine's exit to the Black Sea, we understood that it's also a maritime conflict. That's why the conflict itself is very much correlated with this international security issue on the Black Sea. I believe that we have three important instruments to provide the security on the Black Sea. One is the convention, what I'm going to summarize very briefly, and the Montreal Convention, and the other two is the institutional structures, actually, which have been established by the Black Sea Basin states. Of course, the Montreal Convention is everyone is speaking about the importance of Montreux for Turkey, but it is not only for Turkey, it's also an instrument, a convention, still providing a security framework nearly 1 century, for almost 1 century. Okay, it's a kind of sine qua non for Turkey, because the Montreux regime is regulating a kind of international law instrument preventing the increasing armament in the Black Sea and from turning it into a much larger conflict that will threaten European security. Actually, it keeps the Black Sea away from any gunfight since I don't remember, but more than 1 century, since the First World War, actually. And it ensures the security of the Black Sea littoral states, and it is providing extensive guarantees not only to Turkey but to the Black Sea coastal states. It is the result of the, let's say, successful implementation of the security perspective of the convention, which is limiting the war vessels of the non-riparian states with a maximum tonnage of 30,000, if I'm not wrong, and they cannot enter. They can enter the Black Sea, but they can stay only for 21 days. So it's an important instrument providing preventing the increase of militarization in the Black Sea, and it is also particularly providing security for Turkey from the north. And the important thing is that it is the convention itself establishing a balance between Turkey and Russia. This is quite crucial for Turkey. Why? Let's remember, since a couple of centuries, Turkey and Russia was belligerent states. I mean, we had quite many wars. As far as I'm not a historian, but 17, 18 wars we had Russians, and just one of them we won. The others, all of them, we were the loser side. So Russia was a great security threat for Turkey since centuries. But the convention itself established an important between Russia and Turkey, and since 1 century we didn't have any challenging conflict with Russia, even in the very, very difficult years of the Cold War. So it's a kind of sine qua non for Turkey. I mean, so that's why Turkey will continue to show sensitive political behavior to protect the straits and to protect its security from the north from the Black Sea. And the other 2 instruments, actually 2 institutional structures we have, which I believe that, I mean, these structures can provide more and more security in the Black Sea. The one is that BCEC, I mean, the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation. As far as I observe, the experts, the journalists, the politicians, they are not talking about the BCEC's role in the Black Sea since 2-3 decades, but I believe that we should more focus on such kind of cooperation structures on the Black Sea. I mean, the BCEC itself, it is the most influential institutional initiative in the Black Sea in terms of the development of maritime domain awareness, as far as I see. And it has a significant impact on the conduct of activities in the Black Sea in fundamental areas. I mean, from agriculture and fisheries, finance, control of organized crimes, customs, energy, trade and transportations, and I mean, these activities are conducted in accordance with the international law, and the BCEC itself is strongly taking into account the interests of each coastal states towards the aim of economic development in the region. So let me just give me some very brief information about it. I mean, there are active working groups formed under the BCEC, and they play a strong role in the introduction of joint policy structures for the protection of the rights of the states and individuals in the Black Sea. For example, if I'm not wrong, I'm just at the same time I'm checking my notes. There's a working group on combating crime under BCEC, and they are acting as a platform combating against organized crime activities in the Black Sea, such as trafficking of humans, drugs, not only human issues, but against weapons, radioactive materials, and illicit economic activities, money laundering, for example. I mean, these working groups, we are not talking about them much, but they are effectively working. And the other important mission of the BCEC, for example, they do ensure an environmental security in the Black Sea. There is another working group under BCEC, and they are, let's say, they are showing considerable efforts to develop the coastal states' environmental legislation towards the protection of the environment in the Black Sea region. So there is another commission which is composed of the representatives of all BCEC member states, the Commission on the Protection of the Black Sea Against Pollution, and they are funding quite important joint projects to protect the pollution in the Black Sea. Okay, let me stop here, then we can continue. Maybe the other distinguished guests, they know more about the BCEC cooperation, I'm sure. And we have another Black Sea Littoral States Border Coast Guard Agencies Cooperation Forum. It was established in 2000 with the initiative of Turkey's initiative. Then it gained the institutional structure in 2006. And they are carrying successful activities, as far as I know, from the Turkish case in the Black Sea. And it is an institutional forum of a well-functioning international Coast Guard cooperation. And there are quite many different areas. I mean, they are developing and cooperation. And as far as I know, they are making joint operations against smuggling of drugs, poisonous, drastic, radioactive substances, patrol by the sea, and irregular migration, and counterterrorism. They are fighting. I mean, these are important joint structural institutions in front of us, and we should give much more focus on existing international cooperation in the Black Sea. So just let me stop here. Maybe we can continue in the next round, but there are good examples to develop the international cooperation in the Black Sea to strengthen the cooperation in order to prevent the security challenges, security threats to the countries of the region, what I believe. Let me stop here, then we can continue in the second round.
Thank you very much. János, as a discussant, please give us your comments.
Yes, I was listening with interest to your presentation because they were very interesting. And because Hungary is very involved in Black Sea security matters, not only because of energy, economic, migration issues, but also that we feel the impact of this whole security issue in Central Europe. Hungary is also a member of the European Union, and the European Union has a neighborhood policy, which is dealing with the Black Sea. By the way, the Commissioner for Neighborhood Policy for the EU is a Hungarian diplomat, Attila Várhelyi. But it seems that the challenges in the Black Sea need more attention from the part of the EU. Just to be a chapter of the neighborhood policy is not enough. Maybe the European Union should have a strategy for the Black Sea. The second international organization I would mention in which Hungary is a member is the 3C Initiative, which has members like Poland, the Baltic countries, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria. And we have a comprehensive energy cooperation. For instance, there is a LNG terminal in Klaipėda in Lithuania, and also in Croatia in the Kirk Island, which would be an alternative source of gas against Russia. And we also, in this 3C initiative, regional organization, we expect that Romania should build a pipeline from offshore gas extraction, the Brua pipeline towards Hungary and Vienna. And also it is expected that Bulgaria should build a pipeline connecting Turk Stream towards Romania. So countries around the Black Sea and also Central European countries, we are trying to cope with history. We are trying to create a new energy policy, for instance. Now I would like to go back to Michael van Ginkel's excellent summarization of the challenges on the Black Sea. And when you, Michael, when you were presenting these multitude and challenges, I was thinking that no wonder there is a hybrid warfare on the Black Sea, because the multitude of the challenges, and that also Russia is doing par excellence a hybrid warfare on the Black Sea. The hot topics of the day on the Black Sea security is, of course, energy policy and food security. And Russia shows, this is a part of an information warfare, shows goodwill by protecting commercial cargoes coming from Odessa towards the Bosphorus. This is a promise of Russia. Tomorrow, Foreign Minister Lavrov will travel to Ankara to make an agreement with the Turkish government that Turks and Russians will protect these convoys. On Ukrainian territorial waters, Turkish warships will protect convoys and also have to get rid of the mines around Odessa. And international territory waters, the Russians are guarding the convoys, the commercial cargoes. And but in the same way, Russia is showing not only goodwill, but it's in war with Ukraine, and war means aggression and terror, and it's a tragic thing what's happening in Ukraine. So it's a cold shower and a warm shower presented by Russia, which is hybrid warfare, information warfare. In my assessment, Russia would like to, by this information and hybrid warfare, wants to split the unity of the Western countries. Also, Russia would like to create a group of countries in Africa, Asia, and South America sympathetic to Russia. And in my assessment, Russia would like also to lure Turkey or to gain Turkey to cooperate with Russia. This is also one of the reasons of what Russia is doing on the Black Sea. And all this is creating a confusion for Westerners, what's happening on the Black Sea, because there are antagonistic moves we can observe. This confusion is, in my opinion, it's not dead probably by the Western countries. For instance, the European Union is very late in reacting on happenings on the Black Sea. You understand me? Countries like Romania, Bulgaria, they have high expectations on the NATO summit, which is coming in Madrid, that there will be a stronger message on strategy on the Black Sea and coping with the challenges and ongoing challenges. And why would like to focus on this instability and confusion on the Black Sea, which for me also shows that Russia has ambitions beyond the Black Sea. It's an open secret that Russia would like a stake in economy, commerce, security on the Eastern Mediterranean. Russia has a base in Latakia in Syria. Russian warships are stationed in Cyprus and in Greece many times. Things go towards confusion. Confusion is growing, in my opinion, and the West needs a very coherent answer on this confusion. For instance, the Istanbul Channel or Canal, Istanbul Channel, which is built northwest of Istanbul and links the Black Sea with the Marmara Sea and the Mediterranean, in my opinion, will increase confusion because Russian ships will go out easier on the Mediterranean, and also Western ships could go to the Black Sea easier. Depends very much on Turkey what will happen. So I would like to ask Dr. Barış Hasan, what is his opinion about this Istanbul Channel? How will it change security on the Black Sea?
Before questions, and thank you, János, for your comments. I just want to remind all participants, you are kindly requested to enter your questions during the discussion, and please use Q&A Zoom feature. You can find it at your Zoom panel. Maybe Hasan, you want to answer this question?
Yeah. I can. Actually, that Istanbul Channel is not affordable for Turkey. Economically, it is not affordable. I mean, to apply to make such kind of a project, you need at least around 60-70 billion US dollar investment. I mean, in such crisis economic conditions, under such crisis economic conditions, the Turkish government, to be honest, doesn't have money doesn't have such a huge source to invest in such kind of a crazy project. What the President Erdogan was telling. It is not affordable, and I do not think that it is going to. That's it. I mean, I don't think that that government will start that project, and that project most probably it will be cancelled. It is not on agenda in Turkey anymore. I mean, they do not discuss about it. And many political analysts, and what I believe also, that project was just a populist narrative to take some economic attraction towards Istanbul, but as far as I know, no one showed any interest to invest such a huge money to that project, and it is not affordable. Even I'm not sure if it's worth to discuss it.
Thank you very much. I suggest we to try to focus a little bit in the next part of our discussion. So I will start with one important question. What is the importance of maritime domain within Black Sea security, and what attempts have been made so far to enhance maritime security in the Black Sea? And I suggest we now start with Michael.
Yes, thank you. That's an important question to ask. And as I mentioned before, connectivity plays a huge role within the region. And this has benefits as far as commerce. But with an increase in commerce and the uptick of traffic, there are security concerns that need to be addressed. So 90% of all trade is through the maritime domain globally, but only 2% of global TEUs are checked at ports. And this holds true for the Black Sea as well. That means there's a huge opportunity for non-state actors to use illicit trade to conceal their cargo. So this is an aspect that the maritime domain adds to the security architecture. Likewise, the maritime domain is a complex environment for officials to monitor. maritime domain awareness, the collecting, analyzing, and distributing of relevant information to the appropriate agencies, the difficult task in the maritime domain and in the Black Sea. Again, speaking of jurisdictions, and this was touched upon by a few of the other members, when it comes to information sharing, it's extremely important that there's no gaps within the overall security network. And this can be reinforced by creating information sharing networks or nodes, anything that can allow agencies to address these issues in a coherent and cooperative manner. This is increasingly an issue not only between agencies within a country, but between allied nations or nations that are aligned. Of course, there's sensitive information, and that's why some of these larger organizations in the Black Sea, like the BSEC, can run into issues because the membership is so broad that if there's geopolitical tensions, they can create issues when it comes to sharing information. So this still needs to be addressed in the future. When it comes to enhancements to security, of course, there are dozens, and they touched upon a few here before, and this is, I think, a great foundations already put in place for a lot of these initiatives addressing both traditional and non-traditional threats. On the Black Sea, another one I would add into the topic is Black Sea Synergy. As far as EU cooperation, that's the flagship initiative and kind of works under the Eastern Partnership Program. This is worked on a ground-up initiative, and this is not quoted as often when we're talking maritime security, but it works in both enhancing resilience by addressing some of the underlying mechanisms that can be used by non-state actors to facilitate their activities. We're talking about economic resilience through fishing and aquaculture activities, enhancing tourism, anything that increases the prosperity of the region. And they also work through different ways that align with existing initiatives to enhance Coast Guard training, to increase capacity by donating vessels. Again, Georgia was on the recipient end of some of these. And yeah, I think it was also mentioned that the European Coast Guard Function Forum, the Multi-Maritime Domain, Multi-Purpose Maritime Operation. There's a lot of initiatives and bilateral working groups working together, but as long as we can synergize these efforts to ensure there's no duplication of effort and resources are used in the most effective and efficient manner, there's great potential for building on the cooperation we have already.
Thank you very much. Paul Beckley, please.
Thank you. I mean, just jumping in with what Michael said, it's critically important to answer your region. The Black Sea region is critically important, and for all the reasons that Michael stated. And I would also add, it also is an area that's vulnerable for, we talked about this before, hybrid warfare. There are implications here for the larger geopolitical ambitions of Russia, and the isolation of the region, in other words, the limited access of the region, I think compounds that in some sense, or at least not compounds maybe, but say makes it more vulnerable. So what are we doing, or what have I seen, in particularly from a NATO aspect and also from the EU aspect, and even individual states like the US, for example, has focused on capacity building to try to ensure that the Black Sea allies, whether they do it domestically or they're out there purchasing on the international market, have the ability to deter and prevent that future conflict, prevent those aggressive nations from violating borders, as we've seen in Ukraine. So a lot of work has been done in the area of naval mine warfare, for example, because we just talked about the Black Sea has made surface ships and even submarines to some extent very vulnerable to mines, and shutting down the commercial shipping, as we just said. The entire global economy is dependent on it. And so mine warfare, and not in terms of mine laying, but the prevention of mines is an area where we've tried to increase capacity and have increased capacity amongst the Black Sea allies, and the Black Sea allies have taken this very seriously and moved in that direction. Another one is anti-surface warfare. We saw the sinking of the Muscovites. You know, it's, as I said earlier, it is not an area that is particularly conducive to large surface combatants. And so you've seen a lot of coastal defense systems come into place, and a lot of smaller boats that have access, making sure that they're properly armed to be able to not just defeat it, but deter, prevent war is what we're really focused on. And so we've seen that. And then a third is anti-submarine warfare. for the same reasons that I outlined. And then the last aspect of this, I think, is an area that has a lot of civilian implications as well, but it's maritime situational awareness. Getting all of the Black Sea allies to have enough confidence, and these also probably work for capacity building, but also cooperation measures, to get them to have enough confidence to work within the networks that have been established to share information. So whether they be EU programs that have established networks to be able to provide the maritime picture, or they be NATO networks that have been established to provide both the classified and unclassified networks, but they work to be able to increase cooperation amongst the allies, but also to be able to give the information to commanders at sea, the politicians who work these issues, to make sure that they're improving reaction time and decision time and improving decisions overall for the allies and for people globally. So we've worked very hard to better monitor white shipping, the blue forces, and potential allies that are out there, both in the undersea realm as well as the surface and on top.
Thank you very much. Tinatin Khidasheli, please.
Yes, just a quick response to these issues that we've been talking about. I absolutely agree about the need for cooperation and about the need for putting all those instruments in place and having a good working environment, clearly, being it on governmental institution levels or for the trade purposes and the businesses. But at the same time, today, as we speak about the security, somehow I have a feeling that in this discussion, moment by moment, we are forgetting the fact that parts of the Black Sea are under the occupation. Part in Georgia, Abkhazia, parts in Ukraine, in Crimea. And as we speak about these all nice instruments and all nice cooperation agreements in place, we kind of forget that some parts of the Black Sea ports are simply blocked, and there is no trade, there is no activity, there are bombs and there are tanks rolled, and it's a completely different environment than probably we would have talked at the end of last year. So I think that what is important right now is that all those security measures that were discussed so much over the years, that were chested over the years, needs to be put in action. Actually, today it's not about inventing something new, but it's more about giving a good use to those instruments that already exist in order to, first of all, and primarily secure the ports on the Black Sea, in order to secure the working atmosphere on the Black Sea ports. And only after that we can talk about the further development, because if things go wrong and if things go the way they are planned from Kremlin side and from Moscow side, then we don't know how far these ambitions go and how far they will reach on the various parts of the Black Sea coast. So I would rather say that security, ensuring security and securing the Black Sea ports, both for trade and for normal human human activities like what I've seen in the peace times, should be the number one priority for the institutions like NATO, European Union, or the countries, member countries, and the alliance of those countries. Because again, Mr. Beckley said that during his first intervention, God forbid there is no global conflict. We are in a global conflict. I'm sorry to say that, but I don't know what else it is that we are seeing on the Black Sea right now. Yes, bombs are not falling on the other parts of the Black Sea, the NATO member countries, but it does not mean that we are not in a global conflict. And even more, it does not mean that if things go wrong in this war, meaning Russia gets even little enthusiasm that it's winning this war, then we might see actually a completely different scenario than what we're seeing right now. So now, again, I think that at this very moment, what NATO should be doing is to make sure it does everything possible to secure the security and to secure the ports on the Black Sea, all parts of the Black Sea, whether it's members or not, or otherwise we are sort of in the process of building a new Iron Curtain, this time different from the previous time, by the NATO members and not by Russia. So it's kind of a tragic environment right now on the Black Sea that gives us all the reason to believe that we need to stop being ordinary and being normal and act as it is necessary in extraordinary situations when there are bombs falling actually, and the situation is critically devastating for the people who live there, for the trade activities that live there, for the food security. The issues are numerous, and it's not just about the occupied territories, but actually in a couple of months, if it continues like that, we will be talking about the food security for Europe, Africa, and many other places.
Thank you very much. Barış Hasan.
Yes, I will just conclude my opinions within a couple of minutes. Actually, I agree with Mrs. Khidasheli. Yeah, we are in a global conflict nowadays. It's a global war, global challenge, global conflict. But why it is global? Let me add my opinions. Because the global actors in Europe, the global actors in our continent, and the global actors are, let's say, taking the the further steps to increase the conflicts in our continent. So, first of all, what I believe we should put some more concrete suggestions to prevent the conflict in our continent, in our region, and the Black Sea region is particularly important in that sense. So, as far as, I mean, I see two significant actors in terms of environmental, economic, and military security in the Black Sea region. The first one I mentioned, I mean, the regional cooperation platforms, and BSEC is a good example for it. And the regional cooperation platforms, including the belligerent sides, Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, and the NATO and EU member states, Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania. So that's why, I mean, the regional cooperation is particularly important in that region. Otherwise, we cannot, let's say, we cannot create the, we cannot open the path for possible peace in the future. And here the EU is coming another significant actor, which I agree with the Romanian colleague, Mr. Barabás. And EU is sometimes very late to take action in order to motivate the actors and the countries in the Black Sea region. So the regional platforms, the regional cooperation platforms, and the European Union, they are the most significant actors because they are Europeans. So, okay, I agree with the critics. I mean, the EU, the structures such as BSEC, they do not operate as security providers with their current institutional structures. But if you consider the, especially the military challenges in the Black Sea region, I mean, the challenges primarily affect the security of the European continent. Then it is going to global, but it is, I mean, according to my opinion. So all kind of challenges arising from the Black Sea should be somehow solved or should be discussed with the regional actors and the European actors. So in that case, I mean, regional platforms such as BSEC and the European Union, they are going to play, I mean, they should play key roles to provide peace in that region, but also the non-governmental actors. I mean, you know, I mean, academia, press, media, and the NGOs, they should motivate the governments, the governments of the European continent to create a ground for the peace in that region.
Thank you very much. János, do you have comments or do you want to add something?
Yes, about the security on the Black Sea. Of course, we know that NATO strengthened forces in Romania and Bulgaria. Nearby Constanța in Romania, there is an American air base. And in Burgas, there is a regional Navy commandment, NATO joint commandment. But the good news for me is what Dr. Barış Hasan said, that cooperation in the region is getting better. So Bulgaria and Romania had some discussions, disputes on offshore gas fields on the border, sea border between the two countries. In the past months, they solved this matter very quickly. And the relations between, for instance, between Romania and Bulgaria is getting better and better. Bilateral meetings are going on every week on governmental level, and they cooperate. And this is, I believe, is benefic and very good news also for Ukraine. Because of course, we are a part of a Western alliance. And this is how I would like to finish with the good news about increasing cooperation, this whole very tragic issue, what is happening in the Black Sea and Ukraine from my.
Thank you. The second question from me is about current situation. So we touched upon questions about influence of war in Ukraine. Just briefly, please try to summarize the most important parts of this dimension. So what are the potential ramifications of the war in Ukraine, especially with regards to maritime operation? And let's continue in the previous order. So Michael, please start.
Yeah, so again, as we look at the current development of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the coastal elements may be the most important in the long run. As far as exports, if Russia is currently exporting 90% of its grain to the Maritime Domain, enhancing that exportation capacity by holding onto these ports in Ukraine had a huge impact on their economic leverage. And we're already seeing ways in which Russia is trying to consolidate its control over coastal territories through education programs, through taking away access to media in Ukraine, and through the deportation of people there. So they're trying to access the resources in the area. And this includes also the steel production facilities in the region. One of the most pertinent aspects of this occupation is Mykolaiv. The port there is one of the best capabilities when it comes to creating large-scale ship parts. And this is an aspect that can have a huge impact on Russia's ability to build ships in the Black Sea region that can then project power into the Mediterranean. Sea lanes of communication, having influence or control over these can also have a huge impact moving forward. Snake Island in particular, if they maintain this position there, and they've again invested more in consolidating control by introducing anti-aircraft missiles, modernized rockets, and electronic warfare systems onto the island, they can potentially interdict trade that moves along the island, which includes major shipping lanes that connect Ukrainian ports to international markets, as well as European vessels that move through the Danube Delta, connecting through the transport corridors along the Danube to markets in Western Europe. So Russia's land that it's holding and integrating along the coastline could be one of the most important factors when we come to ramifications on the war in Ukraine.
Thank you. Paul, Beckley.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Michael's comments. I think, as I said before, this is not a global, I mean, I don't mean to correct former Ministry of Defense, but this is not a global conflict in kinetic terms. It's not, and I don't want it to be, obviously. There's a regional conflict. But the ramifications are that, as Dr. Salma said, this absolutely could expand into a global conflict. And that was my original point. And I think that those are the biggest implications, that this is a challenge, possibly the challenge of the 21st century, challenge of our times, to see if we can contain this and not allow this to expand. And everything that was brought up before about Russia's ambitions, I think, are exactly right. I think that this is a reshuffling of the deck, particularly as US power wanes vis-a-vis these other nations. The 70 some odd years of peace that we had were undergird by this US power, US influence. And I think that's inarguably waning, and as that does, we're going to continue to see these conflicts. What, in more specifics, I think what it did was it certainly was a wake-up call for NATO. And I see this in concrete terms of defense spending commitments, which we'd had since, I think it was 2014 was the initial defense investment pledge, that 2.2% of your GDP would be spent on military and 20% on R&D. There was about half the nations were meeting that. And it was a very slow growing commitment, but now you've seen with a very public announcement of Germany that they're increasing their defense spending, and we're seeing this across the board in order to be able to meet their commitments. That doesn't mean that just because you have arms, you're going to ability conflict, but I think that most people would have said, peace through strength, and can imagine if there were potentially some ability to, I guess we understand it, but ability to combat the Russian A2AD and then the Russian joint precision strike from the sea and amphibious warfare from the sea. If we'd had the ability to confront that and had the capability to confront that, maybe this conflict wouldn't have happened. Maybe Crimea would not have been annexed. So I think that that's moving in the right direction. I do see increased cooperation among states, although I'm a little less optimistic than some, because I also see internally within NATO, and I won't get into specifics, but there's still quite a bit of conflict amongst the allies, less so than maybe there was a year ago. This event definitely focused them, but there's still some intractable differences amongst allies. You still see allies purchasing Russian goods, still some Russian cooperation, even to the point where they're purchasing Russian arms. So those kinds of things, I think, make me maybe a little less optimistic about cooperation, but it's moving in the right direction. And then the potential accession here of Sweden and Finland, there was probably, I've been here about 10 years now, and I would say NATO was a very fractious organization when I got here. I've never seen so much solidarity, and I think we have Mr. Putin to thank for that. And so I think as a result of this, it could, if handled properly, increase the viability of these international institutions like NATO. I think there were a lot of people who saw them as being a bit impotent, but if this can be at first contained and then possibly reversed, meaning the gains of Russia here, then that gives some credibility to organizations, international organizations like NATO.
Thank you very much. Tinatin Khidasheli.
If we talk about aftermath of the conflict, Russia started in Ukraine and now full-scale war that we are facing. I agree absolutely with everything that was said here, but at the same time, depending on how adequate will be actions of the Western powers, and particularly NATO as an institution, it can bring to either results, as it was already said, or it can just undermine NATO altogether. We are facing absolute possibility of either happen, depending again as to what tomorrow brings and what tomorrow, literally, almost literally speaking, what the Madrid summit's decisions will bring for all of us, NATO countries, those that are already promised membership, Finland, Sweden, depending what Turkey's final position will be, and also depending on what NATO has to say to rest of us, to those countries who are on a pipeline for the membership. And again, yeah, I'm not, I said in one of the conferences just a couple of days ago, I'm a big girl already and I don't believe in fairy tales anymore. And I'm not that naive to believe that NATO is ready or capable of the decision making that these difficult times are requiring from it. Unfortunately, I do not have that much of a trust in NATO anymore. But also, I believe that there was so much put on stake in the Russia-Ukraine war by Western powers, particularly the United States and the UK, that it is absolutely clear today that if Kiev loses, it's not going to be Kiev's loss. It's going to be Western powers, everybody together, NATO, European Union, United States, all of the civilized world that we know today losing this war with Russia. And if again, President Putin gets even a small incentive that he has a gain, then this game is going to become much worse than it is right now. And I always say, I was asked many times, do you feel scared being Georgia? Do you feel that your security is threatened? Do you feel that Georgia is going to be next? And I'm absolutely sure that we've never been as safe as we are right now. Because, well, and I hope that if Russia loses in Ukraine, then of course there will be a completely different process in Moscow. It's not going to be next attack or next war by Moscow, but there will be completely different political activity going on in Kremlin and in the rest of Russia. But if Russia wins, then Georgia is too small of a place for them to prove anything anymore. They don't need to prove anything to Georgia or to Moldova. If they will win this war, it means that their ambition goes much further, and this further is on the territory of NATO member countries, not the Georgia or Moldova, because under the circumstances they will war in Ukraine, obviously, the Georgia and Moldova will be done deals for them. So I would say that regardless of the facts that the cruelty of the war and cruelty of decision-making of Putin is dictating the full directions to all of us, still the ball is on European Union's and NATO's side. And it is the fate of the world of tomorrow will be decided by the fact how much courage is there left amongst the leaders in NATO and European Union, how much capable they are of seeing reality, addressing reality, and acting adequately. I do not have any optimism left in me, but well, we'll see. It's still out there before the end of this month, but lots of things will be clear on both sides of Brussels. Now, all three of our countries are waiting for the decision of the European Union about the candidate status for the associated trio, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia. And we are all in the expectations of whatever deliverables there will be out of the Madrid summit. And that's where all the decisions will be made, and that's where the fate of Vladimir Putin, the fate of Ukraine, and all of us will be decided for at least coming months and years. And not in Moscow. It is those decisions lie with Brussels and not with Moscow. So when it comes to Black Sea security, yeah, of course, I agree with Michael altogether, everything, every word that he said. But at the same time, we might not need any of those if Putin is winning this war, because then we will be facing completely new reality that is too far from everything that we knew up to today. So again, the stakes are very high. Too much depends on Russia-Ukraine war and on the decision-making power that goes with Brussels these days. So I always tell myself, let's keep a little bit of optimism, as much difficult as it might look and sound at this moment, but yeah, optimism is something that keeps us going. So let's hope that there will be some positive decisions made in Brussels, either side of Brussels these days.
Thank you very much. Barış Hasan, please.
Yes. Okay. The most significant outcome of this conflict in Ukraine, I guess, it increases the armament in the region, and it considerably increases the distrust between the countries in the region and the actors in the European continent. I mean, the atmosphere of insecurity between Russia and the other countries in the region and in the Europe, the whole picture, deepens the security risks in the long run. I mean, as the Georgian colleague mentioned, I mean, it is provoking or increasing the fear of possible Russian aggression towards Georgia, for example, not only to Georgia, towards Eastern Europe. The Polish politicians, as far as I observe, I mean, they are telling such kind of concerns. And here in, not in Hungary, but I didn't see anything in Hungary, but in Eastern Europe, Slovakia, Poland, I mean, they are discussing a possible Russian aggression in the future. So in order to stop such kind of fear, such kind of concerns, I mean, the diplomacy and the regional cooperation, I mean, immediately must be employed for that. Let me tell you something more interesting. For example, from Turkey, as far as I can tell from the discussions in Turkey, the conflict in Ukraine reflects to the Turkish-Greek conflict. I mean, it deepens the areas of disagreement between Greece and Turkey. Greece is arming more and more day by day. I mean, the Greek government is fortifying the Aegean Islands. And they are fortifying, for example, the Alexandropoli region, the region, border region to Turkey. There are more than 300 tanks have already been fortified there. For what? I mean, such kind of, I mean, the outcome of the conflict in Ukraine is the increase of armament in the region. This will not help to anyone else. So, I mean, okay, of course, the politicians and the decision makers will going to say the last points, but we should also in academy, in such kind of platforms such as IFAT, in think tanks. I mean, we should put more effort to motivate the governments to stop the conflict before it extends to the other regions, Mediterranean region or East Europe, Eastern Europe.
Thank you very much. János, do you want to comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thanks to our experts for the dialogue so far. So now I want to give our guests the opportunity to ask their questions. And we have little time, so I will choose one or two questions from those received so far. I see one question which is partly answered by János already, but still I will read it out loud and ask our experts to make comments or try to answer this question. Pavlo asking how to unblock Black Sea in order to start shipping Ukrainian wheat and other products to worldwide clients, by which means and assets. So we know that we have a range of possibilities to address this issue, and I suggest anyone who wants to answer this question, let's just jump in.
Yeah, I believe cooperation is the only way forward. And I think János mentioned in the answer that working with Turkey at the moment may find a way to move these grains into external markets. In the past, there's been a few other methods proposed. For instance, Poland suggested moving the grain overland to Baltic ports and then international markets. And at one time, Romania suggested moving him by land to ports along the Black Sea coast, Constanta, and then to international markets. So there are a few different modules that are possible, but all of them rely on cooperating to circumvent the current issues with moving vessels through the Black Sea.
Anyone else? I'm glad that Michael don't mention the military option, which is a very problematic part of answer to this question, and also connected to a no-fly zone type of discussions recently experienced around the world. So if nobody wants to answer this question, I want to
I want to add something about this. I mean, regarding to that question, we are speaking about the Turkish and Russian agreement, but EU is very much behind. I mean, EU is also a coastal, let's say, through Romania and Bulgaria, EU is also a coastal actor in this region. So it should, I mean, such kind of agreements shouldn't be only between Turkey and Russia, but the European political actors should also involve more, what I believe.
Thank you. So I want to ask one more question, which is connected to some comments from previous parts of our discussion. But I want to hear some concrete answers to this question. Paul Beckley was talking about some disagreements within NATO. So what should be done to increase the unity of NATO members and their partners in the region? So this is my question, and again, anyone can answer it. János, please.
Yes. In a couple of weeks, there will be a NATO summit in Madrid. And the NATO summit should have a very strong message on Black Sea security issues. And this will be the basis of a cooperation in the followings. So I'm very hopeful that this will be this issue of Black Sea security will be enhanced from the Western part at the Madrid summit. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, there are lots of options, obviously, and yes, because there is a summit just ahead of us. Obviously, usually, and even under normal circumstances, there are lots of expectations from NATO summits, but particularly under the current environment. I would say that, at this moment, what will be disaster is after all the talk and all the excitement, not having Finnish and Swedish membership made will be complete disaster. That's for sure. So once the statements were made and once the desire was publicly expressed, I think that there should be everything possible done for keeping the unity in NATO and having those two countries on board, which also makes NATO-Russia border so much longer and so much interesting than it was before. As for the other countries, I would say that yes, strong message from NATO, but what will be, the question probably is what will be that strong message at this moment. And well, as it is not about the membership for us, I would say that the mechanism very close and very similar to that of decision when NATO strengthened its eastern flank and put the soldiers all along the border with Russia, extending that decision to inspiring aspirant countries will be one of those decisions that will make message really strong, very clear, and very significantly, profoundly free from any veto power that Moscow has been exercising over not NATO's decision making for so long and for so many years. Do I realistically think that there will be any serious decisions towards towards our countries? Very difficult to imagine, but I'm pretty sure that not for us, not for Georgia, not for Ukraine, but for NATO itself, for its legitimacy, for its credibility, they need a decision that will send an absolutely clear message to Moscow that their veto power is over, and NATO is capable of its own decision making without any suggestions or considerations from Moscow's desires.
I'd like to just add on that, of course, it'll be optimal if we could have an entirely unified opinion within NATO. But there, at the very least, if this is not forthcoming, many-lateral platforms have been moved forward in the maritime, in regards to maritime security in a few different capacities, especially with regards to some of the more Northern European countries. And I think Norway has taken the lead in a few of these. So if unity on certain issues is not entirely forthcoming, there are at least some mechanisms in place that will allow for a proactive approach to security issues through the NATO platform.
Yeah, I think that that's potential, but I think the biggest issue, I just agree with Madam Minister's comments there, that NATO needs to understand that this is existential, that if they don't react in a productive way, that it's an existential crisis for the organization, and I think they are understanding that. But the issue that I'm seeing, at least from my vantage point, is that, I mean, we could talk about NATO as an institution, but NATO is us. NATO is made up of these countries and the populations. And you ask, what can we do NATO or to have NATO have a more unified response? Their populations have to have a more unified view. And you've got the nations of the South extremely interested in the constabulary work in the maritime environment, in coastal patrol, fishing, fisheries, migration, counter piracy, etc. You've got those in the North that are focused on internal economics and making sure that they don't spend too much on defense. And then you've got the transatlantic that's got a very different viewpoint because they also have a view into the Pacific. And then it was brought up earlier, and I don't know that you can give Ukraine credit for the arming or increasing tensions between Greece and Turkey. I think that was there and rising prior to this conflict. But my point is that there's just different viewpoints, and I think we all collectively have to communicate that better. And a lot of the disinformation, misinformation, all that is maybe missing the point. Is that over the last decade or so, the efficacy of government and institutions is not there anymore. They're not giving the populations the things that they need, and there's so much instability out there that is creating this fractious and tenuous environment. And NATO is this event, I think, hopefully, is starting to pull some people together to understand the importance post-Cold War. There is still a role for NATO, and there still is a role for defense and arms in deterrence, right? If you need to have a strong defense to deter and prevent these kinds of conflicts. Otherwise, it's the largest regional power is going to bully his neighbors. So just in sum, I think, what can we do? We can educate our populace to understand the importance of the maritime overall and these issues that we're dealing with, to try to draw their attention towards this. And then, as I said, I think NATO can make a strong view. And exactly as I won't reiterate that, because I think Madam Minister said it more eloquently than I did. NATO needs to understand that this is a critical moment for them, and I think they do.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want something to add? Actually, we are out of time, so unfortunately we have to end our conversation. Thanks to our experts and guests today for this excellent dialogue. Please be part of our events and discussions in the future as well. Stay up to date with our social media and webpage designed by IFAT. See you all at the next event. And again, thank you very much for our excellent dialogue today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for putting it together.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.